I would like to invite all of our panelists to unmute themselves and turn on their cameras, and I can start to make some introductions. Simon, of course, you will remember from his talk, but we also have Bella, Sufia and Anoushka here to share their thoughts with us. All of these wonderful ladies have qualified in some truly incredible career areas. And actually, we've had a lot of questions coming in by Slido this evening. And so that's, I think, where we're going to start. And then one question that we have got consistently from many parents is simply asking, from your memory, with your parents, were there any particular things that they did or you wish they had done in supporting you to achieve your career ambitions? And I don't mind if, Sufia, would you mind starting us off with that question?
Yeah, of course. So I'm currently a final year medical student at King's, and before that I did a 3-year BSc in biomedical sciences. I did that BSc because I didn't get into medicine first time, which is quite a common thing to kind of happen dealing with failure, but it can be quite difficult as a student yourself. And I would say something that my parents really helped with was supporting me during that time where I failed. Or I felt that I failed. Obviously, in the scale of your life, 1 year isn't really, or 3 years isn't really too much to play with, but it felt really devastating at the time. And it was all down to me not getting my grades. So it was kind of failure on a personal level. And my parents were really supportive. Obviously, they had kind of trusted in me that I would be working at that time to get those grades. So we had to have a lot of very serious talks about how kind of they felt about things. They were really helpful in the way they approached that topic and kind of saying, it's not the end of the world, you know, there's still other options out there, why don't we look into them together? And kind of coming up with a more rational plan to make me feel a bit better about things. And it really made me feel that going forward, I could come to them when I had similar problems and maybe not leave it to the last minute when I thought, when I kind of wasn't on top of my studies before. It made me feel a lot more confident approaching them about dilemmas, or when I had to make big decisions about things at uni or applications. So I think being there for your child and letting them know that you'll support them in good situations and in bad situations, and that you're always there for them to turn to you if they need to talk to you, is a really important thing.
Oh, fantastic, thank you, Sufia. And Anoushka, Bella, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that or the things that your parents had done or you wish they had done as well.
So I have a different story to Sufia. I actually chose not to go to medical school at the age of 18 and turned down my place and decided to pursue a degree in biochemistry. And that was purely on the basis that I didn't feel medicine was a career I could commit to at the age of 18. And I wanted to explore and experience university life before I committed to what was a vocational career back in the day. Ironically, my parents were equally as supportive Sufia, and I think, 3 years later when I had my heart in medicine, I actually then went back to them. Unfortunately, they'd introduced top-up fees in the meantime, and I had to go groveling a little bit, but I went back and did graduate medicine at Cambridge, and thoroughly enjoyed the course, and at that point was committed and mature enough. So taking on what Sufia said, I would say that the one bit of advice I always got from my parents and my peers, and I have an older brother, was be curious and don't forget curiosity is your biggest asset. And what I mean by that is schools are very good at siphoning children into, well, you're going to get all A's, you should do medicine, you should do engineering, you should do law, you should do, nowadays it's computer science with the evolution of artificial intelligence. And that doesn't work for everyone. So I'd say allow your children to be curious, allow them to explore and experiment. I explored and experimented my whole life. I did a career in medicine. I trained in UK and US. And then I came back to the UK and I actually gave up medicine and, what was a fruitful career to go into startup consulting, to then go into the insurance sector. And, that evolution and that curiosity stayed with me throughout my career, and the support of my parents throughout has been something that I've valued. So I would say, to echo Sufia's sentiments, allow your children to experiment. There's no right or wrong. And as Sufia said, 2 or 3 or 4 years is not the end of the world. And careers no longer are single careers as they were back in the day when I know Sufia, myself, and probably Bella's parents grew up. They're now portfolio careers and people can experiment and do lots of things. And companies and corporates, I'm a hiring manager myself, I look for people who have experimented and not followed a traditional path.
Brilliant, thank you. And Bella, I don't have anything else to add to that.
What I'd say on that topic of what advice or tips I wish my parents had done, I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate here and say that I kind of applied for this KPMG program without my parents even knowing, because it was against the traditional route of going to university full time. But when I got the offer and my parents realized that it was a package where, you know, KPMG paid for my uni and paid for the ACA and gave me a salary at the same time, from their perspective, they were like, amazing, go on that program. Like, we don't need to worry about it anymore. But I would say that what drove me to do that program as well was because I wanted to be like self-sufficient and independent as soon as possible. And I wouldn't say that I felt like my parents necessarily supported me in everything I did. And actually, a part of my drive and ambition is actually from the place of, I just want to, like, you know, be self-sufficient and like look after myself. So I think there's obviously millions of ways of parenting, and I don't know how many parents there are on this event at the moment, but don't spoil your kids too much either. I think, yes, give them all the support, but you know, if you really want them to have that drive and rigor and resilience, I think, you know, you maybe need to give them that space to make it on their own as well, and not provide too much of a safety net. You know, and not that I came from a background which, you know, this isn't necessarily well off, but I just always had that in the back of my mind, like, you know, I'm not going to always rely or believe that they're going to, you know, catch me or support me in everything. So I just want to make it on my own.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And Simon, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, it's really interesting hearing the panelists. Actually, the last panelist, I also worked at KPMG. I probably left a few years before you joined, but I was part of a recruitment team who set up the school leaver program, and it's really interesting. You know, the school leaver route is massively, you know, sort of expanded in the last sort of 5 years, and I think. You know, that's a real viable option versus going to university, that I think is, you know, definitely a really good route into the world of work. And Bella mentioned about, you know, one of the drivers for that being self-sufficient, you know, and it is a way to avoid a lot of the student debt that comes with going to university. So yeah, I think that's one, you know, one route to really consider. Really interesting hearing the other panelists talk about portfolio careers. I think that's really true. You know, mentioned about, you know, 11 different jobs throughout your career, and I think that's probably even a conservative number. I think it's in reality probably going to be more in years to come. So yeah, thinking about kind of different, you know, jobs are going to change over the years, and careers are going to change, and not having too much of a mindset that this is going to be a career for life, whatever you're going into as the first role.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got, again, a lot more questions coming in, so I'm just going to move on quickly. Sufia, I do have a question that I think you might be well placed to answer. So it can be daunting to pick a path or a niche and rule out your options too early. So do you have any advice on how best to understand the available options and explore?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think from quite early on, when I was young, I knew that I wanted to do something in the sciences. I just always loved it, and I had really encouraging teachers at school. I have some family members who are in science, so I think I was quite open growing up to doing something within science. I would say speaking to people, as you've mentioned earlier about kind of networking, even just being able to have conversations with people in different fields, in the broad general field that your child is interested in, is really, really useful, just to get a sense of kind of the ins and outs of every day on a job, what it involves, what kind of skills it involves. Are you working with people? Are you working on your own? Are you kind of moving around different settings or in one setting? I found that really, really valuable. And also on top of that, I know it's a bit difficult in this time, but work experience, even if it's a day or half a day kind of shadowing someone, I suppose it might be a bit more observational at the moment, but it could be really good to get a feel of that kind of work environment and whether it's something you can see yourself in or not. But I do agree, it's quite difficult to it's very daunting thing to, as a school child, feel like you have to commit to a path so early on. So in that way, just as Anoushka mentioned, I'm quite glad that I ended up doing biomedical sciences first. It did let me have that kind of uni experience as well, but I also learned that there's so much more than just that vocational pathway. I got my hands into a bit of like research. I understood more about kind of how labs work, and which is such an important part in medicine, but kind of the background area of it that's still so relevant. You meet lots of different people in different fields. It just really broadens your horizons while still being in that same area. So I think that I really enjoyed my biomedical degree because of the depth it gave me, but it also helped me realize that I definitely wanted to do medicine after, so I'm grateful for that. But I think, yeah, just being open to different things, being able to have conversations with people in different fields, and as much as possible trying to have a little taster of those different fields is really, really useful.
Absolutely, and I would echo that as well. As someone who wanted to go into law and went to a vacation scheme and got an offer for a training contract, and then I suppose, like Anoushka did, turn down the offer I had just because I realized, that wasn't right for me at that period in time. And having the confidence to do that only because you've had that experience is something that's so important to support your child in. And Bella, I wasn't sure if you had anything further to add about sort of how to explore available options in different fields as well.
Definitely. Well, I think at sixth form that was the career centre there was the best way to sort of do that, and that's how I was even made aware of the KPMG program, which I sort of launched my career at. It was the college careers newsletter. So I think encouraging your children to always be aware and make sure they're up to date and receiving all these material that the college or the institution they're at, school they're at, is actually producing and providing is the best way to stay on top of all these opportunities, because there's a department doing that work for you in that sense. Yeah,
exactly. Fantastic.
Also, go on, Nisha. Can I jump in? Another bit of advice. I think children growing up these days have the huge opportunity of digital that we probably didn't have growing up. It was very much, go to your careers department, as Bella said, have a conversation and hope that, someone somewhere, some alumni would give you potentially a work experience position. I think parents these days can firstly engage with platforms like LinkedIn themselves to build a network that could then benefit their child. I've had a couple of people reach out to me following an InvestIN event I did a couple of weeks ago, and they've said, can we just have a chat with you? We're not sure what we want to do. It was a technology event that I was presenting on, and can we have a chat with you? And, I set aside half an hour in my diary to have a virtual coffee with these kids who, one day could be my next colleague, my next peer. And I think parents, LinkedIn is quite difficult for children under the age of 18, but parents have an opportunity here to create networks for their children, get them started, get them accustomed to it in a safe setting. And I know that personally, I'm not ever going to say no to a parent that reaches out to me that wants some advice on whether their child should do medicine or whether they, I know someone in digital health or whatever it is. And it's a really great way to form your network. I've actually got a little secret. I've never applied for a job since I left medicine. Every single job I've got out of medicine, which is 3 now, just about to go into my 4th role at Vitality, have been through LinkedIn. So someone has spotted me at LinkedIn at the company. They've had a conversation with me, and then I've fallen into the role. So the other day, someone asked me, do I have a CV that they could look at? And I was like, not really, because I've never had to apply for a job. So that's not to say that I'm great and I'm awesome and, I don't need to have a CV. It's not that. It's to say that the power of LinkedIn and who you are online is such a big part of society these days. And parents can definitely engage with platforms like that to their children's benefit.
Absolutely. And treating LinkedIn as though it is a CV, it is your CV, and that's the brand you're sort of promoting to and projecting to everyone, is I think such an important mentality to just instill in students as early on as possible. And I think the top voted question we've got at the moment then is, what advice would you give a child who doesn't really have an idea of what career to move into? Simon, I don't know if you want to start us off with that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think that's, I often get asked, that question by friends who are parents or their parents thinking about kind of their children, what do I do to kind of advise someone who just doesn't know at all what sort of direction they want to go in. And I think the first thing that you can do is actually just to, and something that I never had as a kind of youngster going into the university and the world of work, is actually map out what all the different careers are, because I think a lot of the difficulty in thinking about what am I going to do is actually just not knowing what you don't know. So actually just having on paper a visual representation of actually what are the different industry sectors, so that then you can kind of start to make those informed choices. And I think it was Anoushka was saying about the kind of advantages of the digital age that we're in. There's lots of kind of online resources of kind of careers advisory sites and industry. I mentioned one before, Target Jobs. They have some really good industry sector guides, and I think it's just, first of all, just mapping out what are the different industry sectors, and then within those industry sectors, what are the different jobs, so that you can kind of just visually see a map of the world of work. And then I think it's about picking off in each, maybe picking off over, and there's time as a sort of 16, 17-year-old to start having conversations with people in different sectors, even if you're really focused on actually, I want to go into medicine. Just having conversations with other people from other jobs in other industries to just understand what they do, and then by building that understanding, that will kind of, I think, helps to set those light bulb moments off with, actually, yeah, that sounds like me, that sounds like I'd enjoy that. So I think it's just a basic thing you can do to just that map, building that map.
And I mean, obviously, and I'm sure kind of everyone here is aware of it, as time goes on, in the next 5-10 years, there are careers that don't exist right now that we couldn't conceive of right now. And even in the last year, that's been accelerated drastically. I'm wondering, Anoushka, as someone who kind of has experience moving between different careers and industries, how you keep on top of finding all of those new opportunities and being aware of what's going on.
So I support everything Simon has said, but I actually would take a different approach. I'd say, rather than think about a career and the outcome or endpoint in mind, think about what your child wants to get out of life. So I'm proposing a strengths-based approach. Look at what they enjoy, look at what they see as their strengths. And rather than do it the other way around and make someone fit into a career, build a career around their strengths, because that's what we get taught. Like I mentor and coach several colleagues and line manage several people, and all I mark them on nowadays is their strengths. I don't look at their weaknesses, because it's much better to build your strengths than it is to focus on your weaknesses and build your weaknesses, and you'll get to a better endpoint that way. So I use a tactic called rope of scope. In essence, I've used this several times when I've made difficult decisions in my life, be that personal decisions, professional decisions, or otherwise. And it's literally drawing a circle on a piece of paper. I wish I had a digital keyboard right now, because I'd show you. And what you do is you put in the middle of the circle all the things that you could tolerate or you like. So for me as a doctor, at the time I love being kinesthetic. I used to play the piano as a child. I loved doing stuff. Maybe that would have led to a career in surgery, but it wasn't. I was thinking of surgery. I was thinking of a skill that I liked doing. I liked learning and I liked reading. I liked talking to people and building relationships, and they all went into my circle. So those are my in-scope strengths, my activities, the things I like. The things I don't like went in my out of scope. And ironically, when I revisited this before I left a career in medicine, I realized my out of scope things were, I don't like sick people, I don't like elderly people, and I don't like blood. So I don't know why I did medicine in the first place, but that was the key that showed me that things that are out of scope are things that you would not tolerate at all in your career life. And then what you don't know about, put it on the rope, actually draw the circle and put it on the rope. And those are the conversations to have with your children. What are their in scope, vision, future plans? What do they want to do? What they like doing? What are the things they're not sure about? So they're on the rope, because that's where you can then build, as Karina, you mentioned, and Simon, you mentioned some curiosity. You can do some reading. So Sufia mentioned doing some work experience, talking to people in that network. And then what are the things that are out of scope? If the career that you had in mind for your child and has activities that they have listed as out of scope, then you know that that career isn't the right career for them. And this is something you can use through life for decision making, but I think particularly right now, that strengths-based approach and identifying your child's strengths and playing to that is better than going for the end goal necessarily.
No, I think that's, yeah, a fantastic way of saying it. And also it's like that, I think if you're doing that with your child, it's that sweet spot of having the skills, but also the values then as well. Because, you know, we get a lot of students saying, I want to be an investment banker. And then we say, well, actually, that's long hours. And, you know, you're going to have to give up your entire life for that. And suddenly it makes them reevaluate, is this the career that I really want to go into? And that's a really important conversation you need to sit down and you need to have before your child starts making those big career decisions. And the second most upvoted question that we've got at the moment is there any advice for those who have a preference for introversion or are less socially active? Because it feels like a lot of recruitment processes at the moment are suited to extroverts or outgoing people. Sufia, I don't know if you have any advice or thoughts on that or want to start us off. Not saying you're an introvert in any way, just to clarify.
I think that's a really good question. I think that's something that maybe, I found it really interesting what Anoushka was just talking about in terms of strengths and based approach, because I wish that was something that we were taught kind of from school to as a way to kind of reflect on what we enjoyed, and that was brought into, as Bella mentioned, like your sixth form advisor kind of setting. I'm not sure. I think I'm not too sure if any of the other panelists have any advice that might be better than mine, but I'd say combining being an introvert again with Anoushka's kind of information about playing to your strengths. I think finding something that you're comfortable doing that also showcases the things that you're best at. I think there are lots of scope in different professions in different areas that now, especially because of COVID, a lot of people might be working from home. There are different adjustments to different kind of jobs. So I think it's a really interesting time for it, but I'm not sure. Sorry, I've kind of skirted around the question. I'm not too sure.
Bella, I wasn't sure if you have any advice or seeing younger school leavers and graduates coming in, if, you know, there is a place for introverts and space for them and how they adapt to the recruitment process.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting question because I've got a younger brother who's in his final year at uni, and he is pretty much an introvert, kind of socially awkward, quite quiet guy. And he might have the best sort of grades and, you know, on paper and the best essays and the best thought process on paper, but he hasn't got a good track record in face-to-face interviews. And now with the, you know, virtual transition, you know, if you're not good in a room with your physical presence or, you know, any sort of gravitas or charisma face to face, I have no idea how you know, similar young adults are going to fare online virtually. And, you know, kind of it's a bit unnatural, you know, you see your own face on the screen at the same time, so if you're already of that sort of disposition. So I think that's a really good question. You know, so obviously you can stand out on paper, and I think it just depends what the role is that you're applying for. And hopefully there's more like sort of interactive as the sort of recruitment process develops and what, you know, what the requirements are. And maybe there's, you know, there's online tests, or there's like some interactive, like something proprietary that the company makes, and you can just, you know, excel or prove yourself through those, rather than it all just being judged on a sort of live video link and you know, how they think you are as a person, or how, you know, how loud and outgoing you are. Because at the end of the day, people are looking for whether you're smart enough or capable enough for the role. And I trust that the sort of recruitment process as it evolves is going to adapt to make sure that those qualities come out appropriately. So I've got faith for the not loud.
Not loud among us, yeah. And would you agree with that, Simon, that you found in the recruitment process there's space for both and that kind of roles for both?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, recognise and absolutely acknowledge it's a challenge for more introverted youngsters to kind of navigate their way through recruitment process. And I would probably err on the side that I think recruitment processes are naturally easier for more extroverted sort of applicants to get through. Not that I necessarily, you know, I agree with that, but I think that that is a dynamic. And I think it's, I suppose there's two dynamics. There's kind of, from an introvert's perspective, navigating their way through successfully through recruitment processes, but actually thinking about, you know, those roles, and if they're going to be the right roles for them, if they are more introvert by nature. So there's kind of two dynamics there. But it's, in terms of kind of getting through recruitment processes, I think that certainly recruitment processes aren't designed to sort of screen out introverted characters, because a lot of kind of more introverted personalities bring a whole range of, you know, other strengths as well. And actually, I suppose one other point that I think is important is that you know, people with a more introverted nature can still you know, project themselves in a kind of, you know, assertive and confident way, despite it maybe not being their comfort zone. And I think that's just through practice, you know, maybe kind of practice speaking and being in kind of group environments, so that it might not be necessarily their strength, but it's something that they can succeed in and kind of project themselves well. So that, you know, on the flip side of that, more extroverted personalities might, you know, have areas of weakness that they need to work on, and they may be very good at sort of projecting themselves confidently, but they may have weaknesses in kind of maybe their analytical skills, or, you know, I'm just picking on a skill there. So I think there's, you know, all of us have different you know, makeup to our personality, and I think it's just about working on those areas that are not necessarily our strongest, and compensating for them through practicing and putting yourself out of your comfort zone, essentially.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and would 100% echo that, especially when you're having conversations at home and talking about what your skill areas are or where your weaknesses are. Because if you're not honest about it with yourself and with your children, you're not giving them the best advantage and the best base block from which to go forward and think about what career they're best suited to. Now, we'll be getting a lot of requests for some quick fire question rounds. So buckle up, panelists. We're going to do a quick couple of sort of one-word answers. I'll start us off on the first one, not to be too cruel. So, what do you think is the most future-proof employability skill? I'm going to start. I'm going to say emotional intelligence. Sufia, you're the next person on my screen.
I'm going to go with teamwork.
Perfect. Anoushka?
Data.
Oh, Bella?
Yeah, I'll say data analytics or computer science.
Got 2 votes for that. Simon?
Oh, God, you nicked my data. Gosh. You start. I put me on the spot. I'm stumped now. Maybe critical thinking.
Yeah.
Put me on the spot.
If there were 3 instinctive jumps towards data, and then maybe that's telling us something as well. And that also leads in, funnily enough, to the most future-proof career. I think my vote for that would, funnily enough, be medicine, especially if the last year has proved anything. Sufia, I'm sorry if I might have nicked yours.
No, that's fine. I'd say tech.
Anoushka?
There isn't a future-proof career. It's what you make of it. And my reasoning, I know it's one word, but my reasoning is you need to learn and morph and be able to exist in the grey. That's, the world's changing very, very, very fast-paced.
Bella?
Not that I don't necessarily believe it, but it's proven so far, and I might be biased, but finance.
Okay. Not to self-advocate too hard.
I'm not advocating that.
Simon?
I'll go for one that hasn't been chosen. Cybersecurity, I think, is a really great. It's a good one.
Yeah, really important one. Absolutely. Yeah. And then one more. Can you give an example of the most unusual skill or hobby that you've ever heard of during the recruitment process? I would say what story I always get told by the guy who recruits for Samsung. He tells a story about someone who had taxidermy as a hobby on the CV, and he still remembers that 10 years later. Sufia?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think if maybe I've done interview practice for kind of either for potential students coming to medicine, but I can't think of anything really wacky, which I know is really bad. Can we maybe loop back to me?
You're going. Anoushka, Bella, if you have any examples, Simon as well.
This one.
I'm trying to think of unusual ones. I've had some unusual assessment centre stories of people getting up to go to the toilet and just not coming back. But I'm trying to think. I can't think of any unusual ones. You put me on the spot.
I think it's quite ballsy to even maybe admit if you've got a really, niche or out there hobby. But I think if you've got some sort of like cultural, something that's linked to your cultural background, that's quite interesting.
So I got a response once to a question around collaboration and trustworthiness, and the person I was speaking to said they watered a garden of plants, and they then showed me a photograph of this flat that had basically been converted into a greenhouse, and that was what they called collaboration and trustworthiness, because they kept all the plants alive. At the time I thought it was weird, and then I came home and realized I have no plants in my own house, and that kind of told me that I wasn't trustworthy enough to keep plants alive as they were.
So it feels over time to be having plants in the house and have that over lockdown, and that was exactly the moment to test out that particular skill. Right, I think that is actually all that we have time for this evening. A huge thank you to all our panelists and to Simon as well. It's been really fantastic to hear your own experience and advice, and I hope that all the parents and carers who have been listening in have got actionable things they feel like they can take away going forwards. We've got a lot of questions about recordings and the slides. These will be sent to you tomorrow, so you can have access to these and look at them and enjoy all of our witty banter for as long as you would like to. But again, thank you so much for being with us this evening, and I hope that everyone has a lovely rest of the evening or afternoon, wherever you might be. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.